if there is a little bit of conflict, which I call a misunderstanding or miscommunication, if you don't address it, it will escalate. And it will escalate and impact a lot more people and could have the impact of someone firing you, you firing someone else, someone quitting.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Erin, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey guys, it's Erin here, Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck podcast co-host. Nicole is still chomping away at her real job. And so today I have a guest, which is always so insightful, so amazing. I get free advice. I get free coaching. And you get to come along for the ride. So if you're new to the show, we are all about doing shit different, about your career being more authentic. And we don't mean the fluffy doo-doo unicorn, be yourself, but really shaking things up and bucking the norm and making little changes to rise without compromising in your career. Today, we have a really great guest, Julie Holunga. She is a leadership advisory trainer and executive coach. She also did a TEDx. She's a former Harvard employee and has a lot of passion around a couple of things, including this concept of lazy leadership and also the concept of how words can, like simple words, can sabotage your career. And so here are some of the things that you'll hear if you stay with us. First of all, what she learned while working at Harvard. And then also, what did she have to unlearn? And they may be right in the same realm. We also learned about the biggest words and phrases that can sabotage your career. And then she shared 3 simple rephrases, right? Like just simple changes to the most dreadful ones that you can start using tomorrow. It's a habit. And it's a habit you have to break. It's a habit we all have to break, including myself. And I loved her reframe on these. It's always so helpful to have those. She also talked about tips for influencing people not reporting to you, which I think is so, so important. And then we really dove into this concept of lazy leadership. Not lazy leaders, as she said, lazy leadership. And she talked about the 3 components to that. And then we really talked about, okay, what do you do tomorrow simply to not be a lazy leader or not practice lazy leadership? And we all know that nobody wants to be a lazy leader. Nobody wants to practice lazy leadership, but we're busy. And so we kept it really simple, really practical, really doable. That's what I love about her and I love about so many of our interviews is like, what can we do without losing our shit because we don't have time to become some noble leader. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this podcast interview with Julie Holunga. Before we start about words that can sabotage your career, I want to start actually with Harvard. So you came out of college. You didn't go to Harvard, but you had some connections there and ended up going to work for Harvard.
Yes.
Here's the question I want to ask. I don't want to ask, how was it at Harvard, et cetera. I want to ask, what's one thing that you would absolutely keep that you learned in that Harvard experience? And what is one thing maybe you needed to unlearn from that experience?
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Wow. Okay. So starting my career in a place that had such high expectation in terms of the quality of work. I mean, every environment, they have high expectations, but there was something about the attention to detail that stuck with me. We had a professional proofreader on staff, and all he did was read printed materials or invitations. That's all he did all day long. Yeah. And I always saw him walking around. He's this cute, kind of short guy with, a red pen, And it was so obvious it was going to show someone the mistakes they had made. So the level that they held us to, in terms of really high quality, like no mistakes were allowed. And I have never shared this, but I'll share this because it's been so long now and I see the humor in it. That the first role that I was in, I was working for um, a center that was on Latin American studies, and the Rockefeller family had donated the money to support the center. So we were dealing with some pretty high-end donors and expectations and all of those things. And in one of the things the notes that I typed out from one of the board meetings, essentially, I wrote pubic instead of public. Oh, spell check didn't catch that.
Right. And your little guy wasn't there with his pen festival.
And my little guy, I don't know, he was on vacation. I don't know what happened. I was mortified by that. But it was such a great lesson because it taught me, this was right out of school, so I was still learning all those little habits that now just seem almost like rituals. Like of course I'm going to do this. So that taught me like, write something, let it sit, whether for a couple hours or the next day, and go back. Because in my mind, I had proofed it, but obviously not.
Yeah, that's
So that was one thing that I really learned. And I have colleagues now who make fun of me for it because I do catch all the little things. And sometimes they tell me, you know what, you can let that go. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect, but that's now ingrained in me. And I do want to deliver. I don't want to see mistakes because I know that plants a seed of doubt in other people. Like, oh, she wrote pubic, or, things aren't aligned, or I don't know. So that's my thing.
Let's stay there for a second. So that's me. That's great for you. But it sits really hard for me because, in fact, my son one day called me an imperfectionist.
Yeah.
Because if everything, I really tell people, like, actually hunt for your flaws, expose them. It helps create connection. Also, imperfection, if you're looking for perfect, can hold you back to do big things, right? Because you're waiting for everything to be sort of ticked and tied. How do you reconcile those two things? Because you get that, you're an entrepreneur. Right. Like, how do you reconcile that high standard perfectionism with what we all know today a lot of people are talking about, which is this necessary imperfection?
Right. It can get in the way, right? Like, yes, don't write pubic instead of public. Okay, now I'm going to stop saying that word. But, there's certain things, yes, that's a mistake. It needs to be fixed. But spending my time there, like, there's a time, Sheryl Sandberg talks about, like, and when is it good enough? Right? And is my time, the question I ask myself now is my time best spent looking for those little details? No. Is my time better spent thinking about what's the experience I want this group of individuals to have? What is it that I want this team to walk away with? What is it that I want this individual to see in themselves that they don't see in themselves now? So it's this weight that I carry. But having said that, my mom is the same way. And so we have been known to go to Broadway shows and we'll be looking through the playbook and find typos. And we always laugh about it. And my grandmother was the same way. My aunt's the same way. We laugh about it, but it is sort of an annoyance. And I think my kids probably would too. Like, okay, Mom, like, great, you found the mistake. Good for you, but let it go. Like, no one else cares.
Yeah.
And maybe no one else sees it. So it is this balance, and it is a self-awareness that I'm not going to, I've worked with colleagues, one in particular, who didn't care about that stuff. And there was constantly be typos in the work, in PowerPoints or printed documents. And that to me is not okay.
Yeah. You did a TED Talk all about words that can sabotage your career.
Yeah.
Where we talk about, like, what are those words, and you sort of drill this into our listeners. Where did you sort of find this passion around this sabotaging language that we can use?
Sure. So I grew up and started elementary school in Paris, which was a phenomenal experience, but that first day of first grade is so ingrained in me because I didn't understand a thing that was being said to me. But as a 6-year-old, you have kids, like we aren't distracted by all the other things going on. I was fully aware that I didn't understand what was being said. I was fully aware that everyone knew each other and I didn't. But I could pick up on different cues that the teacher was giving to be able to know, like, okay, people are taking a piece of paper out of their desk, or people are pairing up, or like I could figure out some things. And that stuck with me for 7 years that I lived overseas. And in some places I spoke the language, or English was very much part of the culture. And it wasn't so different as it was in Paris. But as I became a professional, I started picking up on language that people used. And certainly, going back to Harvard, where there were just these unbelievable people I worked with and some unbelievable women who I'm still in touch with, decades later. And I noticed the words that they used when they were presenting in front of a big group. Or I noticed that their language changed and their posture changed when they were having an internal meeting versus when they were meeting with a $20 million donor. And I started to pick up on that. And it wasn't a conscious thing initially. But certainly as I got older and more experienced and more senior in my career, it really played a role in how I presented myself and how I prepared for a particular meeting, let's say. And then when I started working with others and advising them and started my own practice, I realized, oh my gosh, we all have done this and people aren't even aware of it. And so it was, then I started doing my research and understanding the connection of weak language to our audience and what it does in terms of our abilities to influence and impact people around us.
I love it. And our listeners love, we had a nugget of this on an episode recently, but I say our listeners love, I freaking love when our guests can give us like 2 or 3, right? Because we can't remember much more than that.
Right.
Of the words and phrases that we're probably most likely to throw out there that we shouldn't, and what we should do instead. What would those be?
Okay, so there's a couple, and I'm going to say these are my favorites because I think they're probably the easiest to change. So one is to say, instead of saying, I think we should do X, Y, and Z, especially if you're in an advisory role, right? If you're a lawyer, a marketing expert, an accountant, wealth manager, whatever it might be, where you're advising someone else, and don't use the phrase, I think, because they're paying you for your ideas, for your knowledge, for your expertise. So instead, say, I recommend. I suggest, given my experience, one of those things. And the reason I say that, and the pushback, so I already know what the listeners are thinking, well, but they know their company better than I do, or they know their money and their family and what they want to do with it better than I do. You're right. But if they are hiring you for your expertise, don't downplay that expertise by saying, I think. If you anticipate they're going to push back, then that's great. Then say, I recommend we do X, Y, and Z. How does that sit with you? And so if they're going to push back, they'll push back anyway, but at least hold yourself in that position of authority.
Yeah, I feel like it's serving them too. So it's, to me, it's not just about you and your authority, but I think on the receiving end, as I try on those 2 phrases, I think we are owed some comfort of the I recommend or I suggest versus the think.
Right. Exactly. We know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Even though they may be an expert in their company, we're an expert in what we do. And we have to remind ourselves of that.
Recommendations are sort of gifts. I think is not a noun, right? Like I recommend feels more of like you're actually transferring and giving me a gift that I can choose to keep, alter, etc. Versus I think feels like it just stays with that other person and it's not over. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Another one that I recommend, and you even started our conversation this way.
Oh boy.
Oh boy. Instead of apologizing and saying sorry,
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm
you
late.
say thank you, right? Okay, you were maybe 2 minutes late, I think, today. To me, that's still, within our window of on time. But you started out by saying sorry, and then you caught yourself. And so replace apology with thank you. So in
Yep.
this case, if I'm late, I mean, it's one thing if you're 45 minutes late, yeah, apologize, or you're late in delivering something. But if you're not, replace it with thank you. Instead of saying sorry, say thank you. Thank you for your patience, which
Yeah.
you so eloquently did.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And the third, can I give one more
Yes,
tip?
one more. Let's do
One
it.
more. Okay. So
Right.
oftentimes when we're feeling uncertain or nervous or anxious for whatever reason, in any particular circumstance and situation, we will often preface what we want to say to soften it a little bit.
Wow.
And women do this more than men, but I have also heard men do it. In fact, if anyone listens to Smartless with Jason Bateman, he does it all the time. And his prefaces are, a whole paragraph that by the time he asks his question, we're so confused about what's going on, right? Which I think is very funny when he does it. It's for entertainment. But again, when we're trying to influence someone, we're trying to have an impact. Instead of prefacing by saying, oh, this may be a dumb question, or excuse my ignorance. And I actually had someone say that that's what she does to try to soften things. Just jump into, can you explain? Or what does this mean? You can always go back again, like, how does that sit with you? You can always go back and say, oh, can you explain how you got to this number? And then if you feel like you need to explain something, say, when I worked through it, I got this number. But don't preface it, because one, it confuses people and they don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Two, don't soften what you're trying to say. If you have a good question, ask your question. Don't skirt around it.
Yeah.
Don't try to, again, this is all with the idea of not putting yourself in this one down position, but keeping yourself in that position of knowledge, of expertise. That I love how you said that, Erin, of like, that's your gift to your audience.
Yeah, I would say with that one,
Yeah.
same thing. It's your gift of clarity and brevity versus, the softening edges and the long
Right.
bring.
Right.
I'm a really good wanderer. So I'm going to practice that one the most.
Hey, Erin here. So I know we talk often about this concept of authenticity as a secret weapon to success. I swear to you, my authenticity was literally the number one thing that helped me become both the CEO of a 9-figure company at the age of 42, but also that helped me lead an insanely successful financial and cultural turnaround of that same company. But I get that authenticity as a secret weapon kind of sounds fluffy, like fluffy unicorn doo-doo that leaves you wondering, what do I actually wake up tomorrow and do differently without looking stupid or getting fired? This is exactly why I put together the Authenticity Playbook for you. It gives you 10 plays or really thought starters that are simple, actionable things that will help you up your career and leadership game. To get your free Authenticity Playbook, go to beauthenticinc.com/playbook. Again, that's beauthenticinc.com, just the letter B, authenticInc.com/playbook. Or to make it simple, just scroll down to the show notes and we've got you covered with a link there too.
Let's actually go right into this concept of lazy leadership. Everybody knows they should be a good leader. When people are so busy, what's the number one reason you think that there is this thing called lazy leadership?
Yeah. So this is what I've experienced, what I've seen in the last 2 decades of being in this space, and certainly the last 13 years of running my own practice, is because we're so busy, because we know we need to be a good leader, we tend to take our foot off the gas when we think things are, okay, everything's working, I'm not going to rock the boat.
No.
But what happens, even when things we think are going well, there may be something that we're not addressing that's going to impact us down the road.
Mm.
And where I see this happening the most is when there is conflict. And it may be a misunderstanding. It may not be, this escalated big deal. But if there is a little bit of conflict, which I call a misunderstanding or miscommunication, if you don't address it, it will escalate. And it will escalate and impact a lot more people and could have the impact of someone firing you firing someone else, someone quitting. So the lazy leadership where I see it happening is sometimes it's unconscious, right? It's just we're so busy. We have so many things we're trying to get done that we're not thinking about the people. And when I say lazy leadership, it's not that I'm saying we have lazy leaders, but instead it's a behavior. Right? This is not pointing the finger at people. It's a behavior that happens when we're going so fast and we have so much on our plate. So
I'm sorry. I want to dive into the misunderstandings, these little conflicts. First, how do you know that there is even one? Because it's so easy to miss them, right? What do you need to do differently to just sort of keep an eye on them?
Right. So Brene Brown always talks about clear as kind. So one of the biggest ones, the miscommunication I see is someone says, I'll get that to you by the end of the week or the end of the day. And to them, that means Friday at 11:59 p.m. And to you, you're thinking, maybe subconsciously, around noon on Friday. So I have time to review before I send it out to the client by the end of the day, which to you is 5 p.m. So that miscommunication, and I can get really mad if you haven't sent me that thing at noon. I'm expecting it at noon, but I never told you that I was expecting it at noon. That's a miscommunication.
Yeah.
We're trying to be, it's very common. It's unintentional, right? So try to be as clear as possible. Another one that I see happen is when someone says, hey, Erin, I want to introduce you to Jane over here. And then I say that to you on a Monday, let's say. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm with clients all day, every day. I'm really not checking email that often. But I didn't tell you that. I didn't put an out of office on my email. So you're now sitting there. Julie said she was going to introduce me. I now need that person. I need Jane's information because I need to introduce her to someone. And now it's Friday at 3:00 and I haven't heard from you. So if I don't address that, or I don't say, hey, listen, I'm going to introduce you to Jane, but I'm probably not going to do it till the end of the day on Friday, then you have the opportunity to say to me, oh, you know what? I really need her name because I have this issue going on. Can you do it sooner? Yeah, of course I can. But if I don't know that there's an urgency and you don't know that I'm going to be out of pocket, that misunderstanding can lead to a lack of trust.
Yeah.
And it can lead to where people say, oh, Julie, she's so flighty. She said she's going to do something and she didn't do it.
Yeah, we've all had those team members where their to-do list became our to-do list.
Yes.
Right? And nobody wants to have their to-do list become our to-do list because we got to make sure sometimes they miss it or they're late. And there's nothing you want less.
Right.
And so that communication can really help that.
Right. And I find that, sometimes that happens once and it's fine. And then I've seen and heard from clients, sometimes that happens once and some of, there are people out there, not as many, but there are people who are like, okay, one strike, you're out, I'm done.
Yeah.
So when I think about lazy leadership, the flip side of it is leaders who communicate with trust. So in that example saying, I'd love to introduce you to Jane. Listen, I'm about to go into 3 days of client work. I'm on site doing a retreat. I'll get this to you by Friday. Does that work for you? That's communicating with trust.
Yeah.
That's a little thing, but still it's communicating with trust. The second piece of it is around conflict. So leaders who practice this, they see conflict as a necessity. They're not looking for people just to agree with them with everything that they do.
Sure.
And we certainly, I'm sure for your listeners, there's someone who comes to mind, or even, you've read articles or case studies about really effective leaders or leaders who failed or companies who failed. And it was a lot of that is because of this. I'm just going to agree with you because you're the leader, and I don't want to tell you that I don't agree. And then the third piece is behaving with integrity. And this is a hard one to do when we're going so fast, right? But behaving with integrity is when we see poor behavior, we don't just let it go because stopping that poor behavior is a hard thing to do. It's a hard conversation to have. It might feel awkward for you. It may feel awkward for the other person. And I catch myself all the time, like, hold on, am I behaving with integrity here? And this happened to me last week, actually, where I was teaching a class on conflict. And as I'm standing in front of the room teaching this course, I realized, oh my gosh, I let this conflict go because I didn't want to deal with it because it would have been a hard conversation. And once the course was over and, I got back in my car to go back to my office, I sent an email saying, hey, let's have a conversation. I think there's
Something that happened real time in the session.
Yeah.
Where none of us are perfect.
Exactly. So it is, so that's what I think about the lazy leadership. On the flip side is these leaders who communicate with trust, see conflict as a necessity, and behave with integrity. I know that that's what we need.
Yeah, I love that. It's three things, right? Because I think part of this is people are just so overwhelmed. To be a great leader, right? We're thrown every book under the and then everything to do. I love the first one is so simple, right? Communicate with clarity, little things like deadlines or, I used to always see this. I hated when people would just flip something downhill, right? Their boss, hey, we need something. Forward the email. We need something. And Lord knows that boss gave no clarity. And so I think there's so much opportunity there for both that need for conflict, that second one, and then also for the third, which was
behave with integrity.
Yeah. What are some really simple, tangible things that we can, and habits that we can change for the?
Yeah. Well, one is to recognize when you're feeling heightened in some way because you're going into conflict. Like notice that moment that, oh, I'm feeling uncomfortable. Now for me, I know it tends to be my shoulders become like earrings. My hands tend to like clench a bit. I start to feel uncomfortable. I notice a gut reaction that I have. And for me in that moment, and what I recommend to our listeners is either you step back and take a moment and say, hey, you know what? This is getting a little bit heated. Like be honest about what's going on, or I'm feeling uncomfortable. Can we come back? Can we take like a 10-minute break? Or can we come back this afternoon at 3? So that you're able to think through what's going on for you so that you can come into that conflict with what I always talk about is you can either be on this constructive path where I'm pointing the finger at the individual and that goes nowhere. It doesn't help anywhere. It doesn't help us get through it. Or we can be more proactive. And the proactive approach is looking at what's the situation or the task and not the individual. So even if you have someone who's behaving poorly or isn't being responsive to the client, focusing on the responsiveness and what you need for the client as opposed to the individual. You're still going to that person and saying, hey, I need you to be responsive. But in your mind, you're staying focused on the behavior you want to see as opposed to the individual. And you'll know the difference if you find yourself saying, Erin always does this. This is how she always shows up, that kind of thing. Then you're focused on the individual. If instead you're like, you know what, we want to be as a team, we want to be responsive, then you're focusing on the collective behaviors.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I guess I would ask and challenge though, so many times those conflicts are that the employee needs something they don't have. It's just like in our relationships, there's probably a long-standing underlying, every time we have a big project, you give it to me and Hal doesn't have to do it. Or you side with the customer, not me, or I'm working too many hours or whatever it is, right? There's that human side of leadership. So I understand the don't get too emotional. But when I hear you say, oh, take 10 minutes to walk away, if I'm the employer, I'm like, oh, crap, what's going down now? How do you also be better about dealing with and understanding that side and what is irking them, whether you're directly involved in that or if it's an outside, it's something at home or a colleague, like,
Right.
that to me is the thing that's probably hard, especially in this virtual world.
Totally. Totally. So there are a couple of things. One is don't address it in front of other people, right?
Okay.
Like if you notice that someone continually exhibits a certain behavior, don't address it in front of everyone else.
Okay.
Because that will embarrass them and you're not going to, that's going to put that. I always say to my clients, like, imagine there's this wall of defense and your goal is to keep that wall going down and not rising.
Yeah.
It's still going to be there, but not rising. So reaching out is always a great tactic. Like, hey, I noticed in that meeting that you weren't speaking up, or I noticed that you're not delivering and you're not meeting deadlines. What's going on? It can be as simple, like, that's my favorite question. What's going on here? And if they keep saying, oh, well, kind of blaming the finger, like, well, the client didn't do this and this. Okay. And what else is going on? And so you're really trying to peel back that onion. And maybe in that conversation, you do find out, like, actually, this client treats our junior associates really poorly. And that's not okay by me. As a leader, I need now to step in.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I hear, like, what you're saying is that no one wants to admit or ask for help or say that they can't do something.
Right.
And if you as a leader can open up and make it a safe place that they can admit that something's not working quite right,
Yeah.
that typically helps. And then, there are conflicts that just don't go away. And that's a really difficult place to be.
It's a more
I don't throw this out lightly, but there may be a point where you realize this isn't the environment for me.
Yeah.
Or as a leader, this is not a good fit for us. Because the longer we let those behaviors go on, I'm not saying, someone makes a mistake and you immediately get rid of them. Absolutely not. But I have so many examples of where I have worked with certain leaders. For instance, I was doing some 360s at an organization for half a dozen of their leaders. And there were some leaders who were doing really well and they were investing in them and they wanted them to thrive. And there were a couple of leaders who were underperforming and people didn't want to work with them. And one of the examples was of a guy who people were really struggling with, and he would not take feedback. He never heard it, whether it was from his peers, his superiors, it didn't matter. So I sat down with him knowing that, I had to tread lightly here. I do approach feedback from a positive psychology way so that they hear what they do well and how they could spread that further. And I don't know, 20 minutes into the conversation, he got up and left the room. And it's one thing if he had come in and said, listen, I have a hard stop in 20 minutes. No, that wasn't the case.
Wow.
And I found out later on that he just did not want to hear it. And that was that. The funny part was about 8-10 months later, I was walking on the street near his office, ran into him. And I said, hey, John, not his name, how you doing? And he said, oh, great. Remind me, how do I know you? So was that rude or, I don't know. But it made me laugh afterwards because he couldn't take the feedback and he refused to meet after that. He didn't want coaching. He didn't want to talk through it with anyone else. What that told me was that was such a horrible experience for him that his brain completely shut me out, that he didn't know how he knew me.
Wow. And his boss kept him around even?
I was just going to say, no, within the year he was gone.
Okay.
Because he wouldn't change his behaviors and they didn't know what else. And they kept asking him, what do you need? What can we help you with? And he wouldn't own up to it. It was always someone else's doing, someone else's fault. And so they did suggest, hey, why don't you? They didn't lay him off or fire him, but they did say, I think this has run its course. Let's, what do you need to get out? Yeah.
Interesting. I say interesting just because they probably should have fired him, but that's a whole nother topic of how many.
Oh, yeah.
Senior level things are
Well,
dealt with first.
You know, when people are bringing in money, it's hard to fire them. That's what it comes down to.
Hey there, it's Erin. I'm just popping in real quick to ask you a question. Is there any chance you know someone who is looking for a keynote speaker for their upcoming event? Look, I know that many event organizers, they struggle to find a speaker who provides both tangible value and business knowledge, but that also lights their audience on fire. And I truly believe there aren't many speakers like me out there who are both former corporate executives and professionally trained speakers. And there's definitely none that roll in with an orange suitcase they unpack with their audience. Trust me on that. I would love nothing more than to bring my message of using authenticity as your strategic career and business advantage to people spinning in your universe, especially if you'd be there. I promise my talks always create an immediate buzz, but not just right after, but for months and years after the event is over. You can learn more about my message, style, and reviews, and share my speaking info by going to beauthenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. That's B, just the letter B, authenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. Or of course, we have it right in the show notes to make it easy for you too.
One of the things that you talk about, which I think is really important, is this concept of influencing people without having that direct manager, right? And so leader doesn't mean that you have people reporting to you. That's not just who you are. What one or two things do people get wrong about that, and can they change to better influence others?
Right. So it goes back to that language, right? Like, make sure you're using language that demonstrates your knowledge and influence. One of the things that I always recommend is, because there are always going to be skeptics in our audience, it's an audience of one or many, to think about, what does this person need to know about me, whether it's my experience or what I've accomplished or what I've done, so that they are bought in to working with me or doing different things together. So, for instance, one of my clients, we were preparing for a board meeting, and she is pretty senior, but not the senior most person. And for the last couple of years, when her boss, when they're at a board meeting, the boss will, if a question is asked, her boss will answer it. And then we'll turn it to her and say, okay, but, Erin knows all the details. Well, that puts her in a less than senior, not a strategic thinking role. And so even though that, yes, that's up, but in a board environment where they can choose who they listen to, right? There's no direct correlation. So we rephrased. And so I worked with the two of them, how they answer questions, who answers what, how her boss will talk about her, instead of saying, well, Erin knows all the details. But instead, one of the things we said was, when the board asks a question that you need to, and it's especially when it's a strategic question, or where are we going? Where do we want to be next year? Where do we want to be 5 months from now? That kind of thing. That he turns over those questions to her as opposed to answering them himself, even though he can. So it's a little bit of other people positioning you and you positioning yourself.
Yeah. And that's to give him leadership credits too from the board. They're smart enough to know that they don't want him answering everything. They want to see that leader who has confidence and enables, the people around them.
Right. So everyone comes out looking better.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The other thing, when it's like more of a peer-to-peer, I find that can be a little bit more tricky. And what I always say to people is, think about, what is the current objective, like the mutual objective, right? You all want to be rowing in the same direction. So if someone's working on a project, but two different pieces of the same project, so they need to be aligned, to start by saying, I know we both want to reach this deadline, or I know we both are trying to achieve X, Y, and Z. So it sets that commonality right away.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what that commonality is, that's a great conversation starter, right? To say, like, hey, I know we're both working on this project. Tell me what your biggest challenges are. Tell me what you're trying to achieve so that I can help you and you can help me.
That's really good.
Yeah. And of course, trying to do that when, you're not stressed and there's not a deadline that you're trying to meet, right? All those things that are adding pressure, but trying to do that, whether it's at the beginning or multiple times throughout.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Line back through the common objectives and just bringing those up.
Right.
So 2 final questions for you that we always ask everyone. The first is our buck that question. We always love to find out, what is your buck that story? A story of a time where you bucked the norm and things actually turned out really great for you.
Oh, wow. That's a good one. Let me think. So it does come back to that TED Talk. By the time I delivered that talk, I had applied and been rejected 3 times before I was accepted.
That's not bad.
No, it's not bad.
Yeah.
But at the time, I didn't know.
Yeah, right. As somebody who's probably always been a winner, I get it, right?
Right.
Rejection
Like, I
once
didn't
sucks.
know.
Yeah.
Like, I thought, okay, I'll apply once, maybe I'll apply twice, but I didn't know. I've since found out, like, I know someone who applied 6 times and heard TED Talks. Unbelievable. Like, but in that moment, it was a little bit of like, all right, never mind, this is not going to happen for me. And so when I did that 4th application, I did it totally different than what was expected, what I had seen. There's books, there's articles like, so you want to give a TED Talk, right? So, and I went against all of that and truly spoke for what I wanted to see the difference in the world to be. And I didn't give the answers. I did some things that, I didn't go too much in the detail, but I really painted a picture for what, like, the whole thing is ideas worth sharing. And I really focused on the difference that I wanted to see in our world. If people watch this talk, this is the difference it's going to make. And I talked about, kids, teenagers, up to people who are retiring in their careers, like really focusing. So in my mind, it felt kind of, I'm going to say this, like, oh shit, like, is this going to totally backfire on me? But at the same time, I was like, then it's try number 4 that was rejected. So I've got nothing to lose. And so that stuck with me because it was, this, oh my gosh, I don't want to put myself out there again. So I'm just going to do it totally different than I have been doing.
I love it. I actually just got off a call before this with a woman, and we were talking about her son. And her son's the same age as mine. They're both in 8th grade, probably 13. And he said to her the other day, because he had a school project and everybody was doing PowerPoint and they decided to do a skit. And he looked at his mother and he said, look, Mom, if you want to be number 1, you have to be odd.
Oh, I love that.
Right? In the number. And she thought he was a freaking prodigy. And then she asked him, did you hear that somewhere? And of course he said TikTok. So I am still stealing it because, as you know, I'm the authenticity queen of doing things differently. That's why we asked that story. But but it was so timely just shortly before our call. So
I love
had
that.
to put that back out. Yeah, and you were right. If you want to be number 1, you have to be odd. I thought
yes, that's smart.
I gotta get to the bottom of that so I can quote. That's definitely a quote. Yeah, worthy.
You can't quote TikTok.
Yeah, I know, and I'm not on TikTok, so maybe it's mine now. No, I'm just Before I ask you the final question, where can people find you, follow you?
So my website is julieholunga.com, and I highly recommend connecting with me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you and that you are listening to this show. I have a monthly newsletter that is very practical, makes you think, makes you be a little bit more self-aware of whether it's the words that you use that you shouldn't be or where perhaps you're practicing lazy leadership. And it's all about building trust through these tactics. It's a quick read. And I try to keep it so it's, able to read under 5 minutes. But you can always get that on LinkedIn. And I have a bunch of resources on my website as well.
Awesome. I love it. Well, final question, just a simple one. What's your final tip for our listeners on how to make work suck less?
Yes, I love that. And I was hoping you were going to ask me that one. So the thing that that is practical and easy to do, and what I wish every leader, like if I could wave this magic wand, would be that you pause. Just take a moment, right? And it might be 5 seconds. And by the way, 5 seconds is not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? It's 1,000. Like back to hide and seek of, when you were a little kid, to just pause and think about, how do I want to respond here? How do I want to show up? Who do I want to be in this moment? Because when we're dealing with conflict, when we're dealing with, trust issues, when someone's not behaving with integrity, how do we pause and think about what's the best answer? What's the best conversation for me to have right now? So that it's a really deliberate, and, the opposite of lazy leadership to me is deliberate leadership. And so if one thing I wish everyone would do is just pause. This is something that needs to be practiced. I'm practicing it. I'd say I'm better than I was a year ago, but there's still moments that need improving.
There's a lot of power in the pause. So
Yes.
thank you for pausing with us for the last 45 minutes. We really appreciate your wisdom and your energy around, all of these topics. So thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you, Erin.
Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.